Hello again, Psych 370 students, and welcome to your first video lecture for week 10. Before the break, we finished up chapter 5 of the textbook, which was basically an introduction to operant conditioning. It went over some of the basic principles and some of the major theories of reinforcement. So now that we've established that foundation, we're ready to move on and cover chapter 6, which is honestly a bit of a hodgepodge of a chapter. It covers what I think is a fairly miscellaneous collection of topics. Now, the title of the chapter is Reinforcement Beyond Habit. So I guess the common thread here is that these are all things that people sometimes claim that reinforcement can't account for, even though it actually can. But anyway, 6 main topics in this chapter, as you can see here, and they're all related in some way to reinforcement, so that's why they're worth spending a bit of time on at this point in the course. Now, the focus of this video lecture is going to be on something called shaping, a training procedure that we call shaping. And to get you started thinking about shaping, I want to show you a quick video. So here that is.
3, 2, 1, let's play.
Yeah, do it. Lock out.
She's so quick.
Pandora back for a nice start. The fierce competitors 5-0 Pandora. She goes for that 6 goal.
One more, baby.
That is 6-0. She gets one away from the skunk.
Let's see what she says.
That's 7, folks. Drive to the hoop. She's up. And it's in. That is 1.
Come over here. Yes.
Oh, wow. Look at this. That steal. Wow.
Do it. Lock out.
Absolutely. One more. There we have. That's the skunk.
Okay, so, not a lot of outside shooting in rat basketball. It's an inside game, lots of points in the paint in rat basketball. But what I want you to think about is, how would they have gotten those rats to dunk basketballs like that? How would they have gotten the rats to acquire that behavior? I mean, they obviously couldn't have just waited for a rat to just so happen to dunk a basketball, right? And then reinforce it for doing so, because they would have waited forever. The rat is never going to do that on its own. So instead, they had to build up to that. So they had to start small. So at first, whenever the rat showed any interest in the ball, for example, whenever it approached the ball, whenever it sniffed the ball, or whatever, that's what they'd reinforce. That's what they'd follow with the reinforcer, like food, or maybe a secondary reinforcer, like a sound that the rat associates with food. And so, of course, based on the law of effect, that behavior is going to get stronger, right? It's going to become more frequent. The rat is going to start approaching the ball more often after that, because that's what you're reinforcing it for doing. And then once the rat is frequently doing that, then you raise your standards. You increase your requirements as far as what the rat has to do to keep getting those reinforcers. So now just approaching the ball isn't enough. Now maybe the rat has to actually touch the ball to get the reinforcer. And then once it's consistently doing that, you increase your requirements again. Now just touching the ball isn't enough anymore. Now maybe the rat has to actually pick up the ball to get the reinforcer. And then once it's doing that, maybe it has to pick up the ball and move toward the hoop. Then maybe it's got to get even closer to the hoop. Then maybe it has to raise up on its hind legs while it's near the hoop, and so on and so on. So you keep going like that. You keep requiring it to get closer and closer to the goal behavior, closer and closer to the target behavior that you're actually trying to train, until finally the rat is actually doing what you set out for it to do. It's actually dunking the basketball. So again, this technique that I'm describing here is called shaping. We call this process shaping because you're basically shaping the animal's behavior. You're sort of molding it like clay almost by using reinforcers to guide the behavior in the direction that you want it to go in. So probably the best definition of shaping that I could give you would be the one that Skinner himself provided for it. He defined shaping as a method that involves the differential reinforcement of successive approximations of a behavior. Okay, the differential reinforcement of successive approximations. So let's break that definition down a little bit. The differential reinforcement part is just a fancy way of saying that you're reinforcing some of the animal's behaviors and not others. So you're providing those reinforcers differentially, right? Some behaviors get reinforced, others don't. And the successive approximations part means that the behaviors that you're reinforcing are ones that more and more closely approximate the goal behavior, the target behavior that you ultimately have in mind, like dunking the basketball. So when you shape an animal's behavior, you first reinforce a very rough, very broad approximation of the target behavior, right? Like just approaching the ball. You use that as your starting point because you got to start by reinforcing something that the animal will actually do. And then you get more specific from there. So the next step in the shaping process would be something that's a bit closer of an approximation, like actually touching the ball. And the next one would be a closer approximation than that. Then you'd reinforce an even closer approximation than that one, and so on. And so throughout the process, you differentially reinforce these behaviors that successively approximate the goal behavior. You reinforce the animal for doing things that more and more closely resemble what you ultimately want it to do. That's how shaping works. So it's one thing for me to just tell you about shaping, but it might be more helpful for you to actually see it in action. So I've got a few more videos lined up here that I want to show you. The first one picks up with the example that I've been talking about. So it's about how you'd use shaping to get rats to dunk basketballs. But then I've also got one where Skinner will use shaping with a pigeon, and another one where a trainer will use shaping to teach a dog to do a new trick.
It's about 3 or 4 month process of working with the rats to play basketball. It's an offset of operant conditioning. It's called shaping, which is they learn a very complex behavior by doing it in small little steps. Say hi to Irene. We start very simple. First, they have to learn how to touch the ball, get the buzzer, and then come get some food as a reward. Where one day just touching the ball with your nose is fine, now you have to touch it with your mouth. Then they have to learn how to pick up the ball. Finally, to get the rat to go through the hoop, and we have a platform. We put the ball up on top of the platform, go through the hoop, get some food, good job! We'll continue to give them some food each time they go through the hoop the correct way. And eventually they learn, okay, I need to go through the hoop. And by then, we have a fully trained basketball star rat.
And we're going to try another pigeon now, and I will try to pick out some particular pattern of behavior and make it a more frequent part of the repertoire of the bird. Very fine. This bird has been already conditioned to eat when the magazine sounds and the light flashes. Now we'll just watch its behavior a bit. It's not doing anything in particular, you see, but I'm going to try to get it to do something. Suppose I shape up the behavior of making a complete turn. What I do is simply, as I did then, to wait for some part of that behavior. There's more of it, you see. You can see that the effect is instantaneous. I'm waiting for it to turn counterclockwise now. And then I reinforce that movement. And I wait for a more pronounced movement than that. It's got to be more than that. There we go, all the way around.
Here is one way you could teach a dog to do a handstand by using shaping. First, you would click the dog for thinking to step backwards onto a low object, and then you would increase the height of the object and click the dog for choosing to put his back feet up on the object. The next step would be clicking the dog for taking his feet off so that he would be freestanding, and then clicking for steps forwards. Here is the final result.
Okay, so again, by starting small, by starting with a very simple behavior, a very broad approximation of the goal behavior, you can use shaping to get animals to do entirely new things. You can get them to perform behaviors that they almost certainly never would have performed without the shaping process. So this is how trainers at SeaWorld get their animals to do all sorts of neat tricks, right? Like jumping through hoops and doing backflips and all sorts of other stuff that people will pay money to see. They use shaping. So shaping is a very useful technique, but it's based on the law of effect. It's just an application of the law of effect. Shaping works because people and animals will keep doing what results in reinforcers. And if something that once produced reinforcers no longer does, they will vary their behavior to try and make that reinforcer appear once again. And so, of course, when they do that, you reinforce the variations that are closer to the goal. And that's how you guide the animal's behavior in the direction that you want it to go in. Okay, well, that's about all I have to say about shaping. So I'm going to stop this video lecture here. But if you have any questions about shaping, then please let me know. Take care, guys.